The thing is with Ireland, for me, they didn't look like the team that we saw in the Six Nations and definitely not the World Cup. But that gives us interesting stuff to speak about. The whole thing around Sam Prendergast and Jack Crowley, the Lions, the narrative now Andy Farrell leaves Ireland to go and coach the Lions and Simon Easterby takes over. The Six Nations is so important for so many teams leading up to the Lions. But where are Ireland? That game against the All Blacks was a must-win game for them, but it wasn't a must-win game for them. It was just us building it up in the media. But Ireland, it's been a really interesting time over these last few weeks just to see where they really are. And I tweeted it, and it wasn't just a tweet for the sake of tweeting, Andrew. It was genuinely what I believe, that we could see a real identity in Australia. So that's positive for them, especially with the Lions tour coming up in the summer. But from an Ireland perspective, there's more questions than answers. And a lot of that revolves around the 10, which I'm sure we'll dig into now. More errors than I've ever seen. 28 handling errors in that game against Australia. The line out didn't function. So there's a load of question marks over that team, which I didn't think we'd have, because we were looking at the number 1/number 2 team in the world, and everything was about momentum for them coming through. But it's given us a load to speak about. It's been a really positive tournament, and I'm supporting Ireland.
You're an Irish
for a
fan,
bit now.
I
love Ireland. We love Ireland. We'll have a live show as well.
We'll be back in Dublin in the end of January as well, just to let people know. But the one thing people haven't mentioned much of, and you talk about their attack and the errors and all this stuff and what we got used to with Ireland over the last few years, the big thing for me is Mike Catt leaving the coaching ticket in the summer. And we've seen, I'm not saying they've gone backwards, but we've seen less accuracy, more errors. People are saying, people know how to defend against Ireland now and they're predictable and all this stuff. These are just sound bites that have come out in the press. But Mike Catt, who was involved for quite a few years under Andy Farrell, ran the attack. The Six Nations last year, Ireland were a brilliant team to watch, ball in hand. And they didn't win the Grand Slam because we did them over at Twickenham. Go on, Marcus Smith. But in reality, the Leinster model and the Ireland attack went hand in hand. And Mike Catt was central to that. And he's left the building over the summer after they beat South Africa over there and levelled the Test series. And I just wonder sometimes, and it's a big question for Ireland now with Faz going. And I listened to Simon Easterby's interview after the game, and he talked about evolving the team over the Six Nations, bringing in some new stuff and changing a few things with him in charge. It's quite an interesting dynamic, isn't it? How much is Faz going to oversee stuff from afar? Because obviously he steps down, rightfully so, because he's the British and Irish Lions head coach. But there'll still be that continuity piece around what Faz wants, and he'll be, checking in with Simon Easterby. But they're still a good team. There's a few things that need to evolve and change there. They've got some good young guys coming through. That I think they missed massively Tyg Furlong and Dan Sheehan in the front row as real all-rounder. I'm not just talking about scrummaging. I'm talking about real all-rounders adding value to their game, carrying, ball handling, that ability to play out the line, play out the back, carry, tip on. They're great exponents of it. And we've seen Tyg Furlong, chuck 30-metre passes, haven't we, over time. So they've missed those two massively. But I don't think they're in a bad place. Right, there's question marks, like you said, Jim. The biggest one at 10 with Prendergast and Crowley. And it's interesting the fact that he started Prendergast again. And he played okay, did all right. But then brought Crowley on, and Crowley looked good. And so that's going to be a debate that rages on now. And, Prendergast will go back to Leinster, and I presume he'll pick up the 10 jersey and take that forward. Crowley goes back to Munster, and let's see how they go during the Investec Champions Cup, which starts on Premier Sports this weekend, James.
The dynamics is really interesting around the 10 and the Munster, Leinster and the social media rage that you see unfold. But listening to snippets off the ball, chatting to Bernard Jackman, chatting to a few mates, I actually feel a little bit sorry for Sam Prendergast, because he's come in, he's been given the 10 jersey in the last couple of weeks ahead of Jack Crowley, who's been the man who's taken over from Johnny Sexton effectively. And I imagine Sam Prendergast is having to deal with all the negativity around the fact that he's been fast-tracked into that role. But again, chatting to Bernard, chatting to a few other people, like he's been waiting a long time. He's been in the emerging Ireland team. He's been working with the Ireland coaches for a while. Ireland look better with him at 10. I don't know what it is, attacking-wise. And Jack Crowley was brilliant when he came on. You know I'm a massive Jack Crowley fan. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's like Brian O'Driscoll says, the body shape that he has at the line. Their attacks looks more like when Johnny Sexton was playing for Ireland when he plays at 10. I know Ireland were losing when he came off and Jack Crowley came on and made a big difference. Him and Craig Casey both sped up the game, and maybe that is the role of a Craig Casey and a Jack Crowley going forward for Ireland. But there is something about that kid that is pretty special. The kicks to corner, I know he missed one against Fiji, but he's banging it 5 meters from the try line.
Yeah, some of the strikes, and I watched it, I said it last week, didn't I? Pure as you like. And Jim, you questioned his physical size and attributes. The boy can kick a ball sweetly.
And that's the thing. The physical attributes, you can make them statements in a number of ways. One will be, like I said, in your kicking, how confident you are taking the ball to the line. The tackling, we'll see. He's not missed a load of tackles, has he? It's not as if he's being run over and he's being run through and he's been made to look embarrassed. He made a great try-saving tackle on Kellaway. I know it was a slightly different tackle where Andrew Kellaway steps inside. It was almost like a bit of a tap tackle style, but a brilliant tackle nonetheless. Very brave tackle because Kellaway could have gone on the outside or on the inside of him, but he made a brilliant tackle. But it is interesting watching it unfold as a neutral Ireland rugby fan and the whole dynamics. And this is what I was saying to Bernard and a few mates. I actually quite like the drama. You've got the Munster, you've got the Leinster, you've got the outsiders, and we've got an Ulsterman, friend of the show, coming on later. You've got the Northern Irishmen as well, and you've got the poor farmers down in Connacht, but they've still got some brilliant players like Finlay Bealham, Mac Hansen and Bundy Aki who fit in really well. But I do like the drama and the hysteria of the Leinster lads being favoured. You know, like there's a storyline in that. The trusted players from Leinster that are generally make up the heartbeat of the Ireland squad now. But that conversation is going to go on. They probably need to sort that out as well. It'd be interesting to see Sam Prendergast if he goes back to Leinster and if Leo picks him as the starting 10, because that'll be a shift because they've had Ross Byrne, Frawley, Harry Byrne, maybe in that order, and then Prendergast. I know he's starting to leapfrog Harry Byrne potentially. I know there's unrest with Ross. There's talk of him going to Montpellier, Kieran Frawley being that utility player. But I think Andy Farrell wants to pick Sam Prendergast as his first choice 10.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Like the start of the autumn, the big debate was, is it Frawley or is it Crowley as the 10s? And then Prendergast has come in. And now the big debate is it Prendergast or is it Crowley? Poor Kieran Frawley, he drops the goal to beat the South Africans in the summer and no one's talking about him at the minute. So,
that's how good the players are for Ireland.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it'd be interesting.
What do you think?
I'd still go Jack Crowley at the minute. He's got more experience, but I'm with you. I like the look of Sam Prendergast. He's at the start of his international career, obviously. I think he needs more time in the seat running that Leinster team. That selection against England in week 1 of the Six Nations in Dublin will say it all. And it's really, really tough because Prendergast has answered a lot of the questions around him, and they do look fluid. I want him to sometimes go to the line a bit more. Like there is times when he just stays square and tips it on. Whereas, Sexton was properly going to the line and
maybe that's the physical attributes what we're talking about then.
And
maybe
that's what he'll get with more game time at 10. And he's only played a handful of games where he started at 10 for Leinster as well. Let's be clear about it. But he's got a huge amount of talent, and that'll only grow with experience. And it's a good problem to have. Like, it's not a bad problem to have, 2 proper good 10s. And Crowley's not a 10 that stands in the pocket and just kicks. You've got similar players. Crowley likes to play out the game line and organise and have runners off him. But you're right, they look quite fluid with Prendergast at 10, and it's a debate that will rage on. And sport's weird, isn't it? We're talking about who's going to start for Ireland on the 1st of Feb in the round 1 of the M6N Nations Cup, whatever it's called now, Six Nations. And in reality, that's a long time away, isn't it? There's so much water to go under the bridge. 4 games of Champions Cup rugby, some big some big rivalry games and derbies over Christmas in the URC as well to get through. And I'm sure Leinster are playing Munster over Christmas, and that's the big talking point. Jack Crowley coming up against Prendergast, hopefully, and it'll be like a trial match, which Leinster will probably win.
Do you think their attack has become a bit predictable then? I think there was sort of shades of that World Cup semi when the All Blacks really shut them down.
I think the defences are better. Goode alluded to it. I think the more time you analyse them, yes, the All Blacks beating them at the World Cup would have been a platform to show how you defend against Ireland. Again, I'm not smart enough to go into the details of like how you do that. 2 in the tackle, 1 high, 1 low, spread the field, blitz on the outside, get runners in between the tip runners, which Australia did. Like we saw Australia, the way in which they defended against them, like the intercepts that they got and the pressure that Ireland were under at points. But there could be a number of reasons for that. Like gain line's a big thing as well. Ireland's attack, a lot of it revolved around line out set plays. James Lowe, we saw, would come in a lot off the line out options that they had, and their line out's been very poor. 4 obvious ones at the weekend where they didn't win the line out. So these things where you don't have any momentum launching your attack off, that, again, the injuries that they've had, Dan Sheehan, Ty Furlong, players spotting on Doris a lot more, like double teaming him. So he's having to work a lot harder. Yeah, like the change of 10 as well that we've just gone into depth about. That's all I'm seeing with that. And the fact that the teams that they've come up against in the Autumn Nations series are a lot better than lesser teams. Do you know what I mean? Like the best teams that they've come up against defensively. And we saw the physicality of the All Blacks, both in the World Cup and in the Autumn Nations series. We saw the physicality of Australia, which is like the foundations now of their game, which is brilliant to say that Australia is physical as they are. But you just saw how they defended, how they counter-rucked, the turnovers that they were getting in and around the Jackal. They lost 4 at the Breakdown Island. So there's a few things. So I don't know if you can necessarily gauge it on their attack coach or specifically their attack as a framework, because there's a number of things. I mentioned the 28 handling errors, 20 turnovers in the match as well. So does that mean that their attack isn't functioning, or is that a number of things around the contact skills as well as their discipline, the penalties that they're conceding as well? So I think there's a number of different things in that might actually 2 + 2 = 9.
Does it, James?
It doesn't. My house,
yeah. But and Jim's right. Look, momentum's the big thing. So if you haven't got your starter play right, which starts with the delivery from the line out, the knock-on effect of that means people are you're not flowing onto the ball if you haven't won that first collision, and then the attack doesn't look as sharp. The defence can get in control and on top, and then you add in the errors, the handling errors. The new face at 10, and perhaps not being at the line as much. Not him, but everyone just being half a second off. And at international level makes the biggest difference. And the Leinster framework, they can get away with it in some of the URC games by being slightly off, but at international level, as we've seen, it's if you're slightly off, you're going to be under the pump from a defensive perspective as well as an attacking perspective if you're making the errors that you're making on top of having no momentum, not winning the collisions and not, getting through the kind of gain line and putting defences under pressure that way. So they're not far off, and it's not a bad place to be. But it does kind of ask questions, and rightly so, because for the last few Six Nations they've been the best team, kind of hands down. But everyone always goes back to that World Cup quarter final, and how do they eventually get that monkey off their back? And it's the detail of the attack, and that starts with, as Jim said, the set piece hasn't been good enough, I don't think, over the autumn for them in terms of their precision, and everything stems from that really in attack.
The biggest thing about Ireland now is everyone sees them as one of the top 2 teams in the world. Yeah. So Australia are on a 6-day turnaround. Yes, they get beat by Scotland, and them Australian players looking at the Scotland team like they're looking at the Ireland team. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they should have. Or they should have. Not maybe. They should have. there would have been an eye on that Ireland game for sure. And chatting to Matt Gitto and Drew Mitchell, their worry was they'd overlook the Scotland game and go all in on a 6-day turnaround, which is ridiculous to play a test match 6 days turnaround. But you could see the way that they turned up physically and the mindset that they had. And they're a well-drilled team. Their line-out under Jeff Parlin, brilliant. Their scrum's so much better. The fact that Joe Smith had the bollocks to drop Tupou at prop, and then he comes back and puts in a performance like that at the week puts a performance like that at the weekend. Their breakdown skills, their innovation in attack, the confidence to go from their own try line. Like, that's what happens now when you're up against Ireland. Every team sees you as one of the best teams in the world. So therefore, emotionally, they've got to try and raise that. And we saw emotionally, Ireland weren't there for that All Blacks game, which was all a bit weird. So makes the landscape of rugby in a really good place at the minute, though, because anyone could beat anyone, it feels. The great Stephen Ferris, friend of the show, former British and Irish Lion and Ulsterman. Stevie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Jim. Not too bad. It's been a crazy 9-10 weeks, as you know. I've been on text with the newborn baby in the house, so he's doing well, everything's good, and getting a few hours kip and watching a lot of ruggers, so it's been a good few weeks.
Is there a feeling in Ireland of a bit of a them and us? As in Leinster on their own, and then the other provinces, Ulster, Connacht and Munster that you mentioned, not feeling fully part of that because of how successful Leinster are. And I'm talking as an outsider here, and Jim brought something up that he heard them talking about potentially 2 teams in Leinster competing, and having another province from the Leinster area, maybe splitting it down the middle or something like that. But what is the feeling like as an Ulsterman? And then obviously when you're playing for Ireland, it's all in and everyone wants Ireland to win. But then you go back to the provinces and you've got all the Leinster lads being well looked after, a monster squad. Like you said, the squad is thin at Ulster because there's injuries and, the investment isn't there compared to others. Munster similarly, and Connacht have always been the kind of team at the bottom, but overachieving with certain players and squads and stuff. But is there a them and us with Leinster and the rest of you? Because it just seems so imbalanced.
I think the players themselves probably would say no.
Because they have to.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I genuinely believe that most of the guys who are up and down the road to Ireland camp for Autumn Nation Series or Six Nations, whatever, World Cup preps, like they do feel 100% part of like the organisation. But I think if you ask fans, 100% them or us. When you read about central contracts, nearly the starting 15 of Leinster have central contracts being paid by the RFU, and we have Ian Henderson who just re-signed with Ulster Rugby and has come off a central contract. So I don't believe, I might be wrong, I don't believe we now have anyone on a central contract. So again, fans are going, well, hold on a second, they're fitting £3-4 million worth of wages there for Leinster, except we have to fight our own corner up here. Like, that's the way we're treated, blah blah blah. But that's a fickle way to look at it, in my opinion. I think Irish rugby's done a great job, lads, over the last decade of making sure the way the provinces are handled, it's all for the benefit of the national side. And yes, that can be tough on likes of Ulster and Connacht, who maybe are thought of less of potentially. But I certainly think for the Irish national team, the way the whole organisation has been ran, it's really hard to disagree with what they've done, just because of the success that the national team's had.
Yeah, but if you're a Leinster player coming through that system and there's no central contracts in Ulster, and they're like, I tell you what, there's no place for you here at Leinster. Go and play up in Ulster for a bit. Belfast it's lovely. It's lovely up in Belfast. Off you go. As a player, you'd be like, well, hang on. But you go into oblivion there. I'm not saying that is the case, because we know that players like Jason Stockdale and obviously Ian Henderson as well and Rob Herring and stuff are part of the Ireland setup. And that is the conversation. I saw it on Off the Ball. They were talking about another province potentially in Leinster because of the amount of talent they produce. Are you hearing anything about that? And you'd understand why they'd want to do that, right? From a player staying in Southern Ireland as opposed to going to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, lads, as a former Ulsterman, like that's all I wanted to do was play for Ulster, and like you come up through the underage system. You wear the red hand on your chest. You put your heart and soul into everything. You're in the Ulster Academy, or you win your first cap for Ulster. You try and get some success. You're maybe in some big playoff games. Would I just want to jump down and go and play for Leinster, Connacht, or Munster? If the wages were similar, if there was an opportunity of maybe winning a trophy over the next few years, lads like home comforts down in Dublin, down south across the border, they also get their sportsman's tax relief, which isn't something that's ever brought up. Like, they're getting a...
Go on, tell us.
Well, down south, and it's not just for rugby players, it's professional sportsmen and women.
Yeah.
It's for actors, it's for singers, songwriters, musicians, yeah. And more or less they get a lump sum of the tax that they've paid back at the end of their career. So when they officially retire. So it's actually, I think it's your 10 best years that you've had.
Yeah.
You get 50% of the 50% tax that you paid. So like,
it's gone up. I thought it was 40 of the 40.
Oh, you could be right, Goody. The tax is always changing. It used to be 50-50 anyway. Yeah. But like lads down there retiring from rugby and going buying a farm.
Yeah.
Like that's the difference. Boys up in here in Ulster are retiring and like going, geez, right, I have to go back and study, or I have to go to, they have that little cushion. So unless Ulster Rugby are putting in an extra 50k on top of your salary, why would you come up and jeopardize another 250 grand of one of those 10 years for your sportsman's tax relief? So that's just another angle to it. Like, I'm not saying that's the be all and end all, but when you're in a winning environment, a team like Leinster, more importantly, also Munster over the last couple of years as well, because they had a good bit of success with their URC win. Lads are happy enough that just being a part of it. They're happy to be a part of it, even though they're not playing every single week.
Pod.
Rugby pod.